Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 174. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the last podcast of August 2021. And boy, has the last 2 weeks been kind of rough for a lot of people, myself included. The world is in a very odd situation right now. There's a lot of things that are happening, which I'm not necessarily going to say because they are a bit depressing to kind of think about and discuss, and I don't want to date this podcast too much, despite the fact that I've already dated said podcast. But yeah, things have been a bit odd in the world. People don't really know what's going on. Some of the things I am going to talk about do reflect just how bizarre the last 2 weeks have been in terms of everything that's happening in the world. But as you can probably tell by the length of this podcast, it is going to be quite a lengthier one. Typically, how the podcasts go after about August, September time is when the podcasts start getting more busy and more packed because everyone wants to show off the new game, show off the new trailer, get everyone hyped for the next year. And boy, does next year need a lot of hype, given how disappointing a lot of media has been, in my opinion. But let's talk about some of the better and more positive things I was able to do over the last 2 weeks, because if you've listened to the last few podcasts, I haven't really been doing much. I'm kind of in between things, but I did actually manage to finish and actually do a couple of things. And the first one I want to talk about is the fact that I got around to watching The Suicide Squad, not to be confused with Suicide Squad. And yeah, directed by James Gunn. I actually really like this film. It is not a perfect film. It is certainly not James Gunn's best film, but it honestly feels like a breath of fresh air to actually have a superhero film that just feels like a film. There's like next to no setup, no reference to DC's other superhero characters. It honestly just feels like its own standalone film. And almost everything about this film just works. The chemistry with the characters, I think, was, top notch. I think the story was simple enough that you can jump into it without knowing anything about the Suicide Squad or DC Comics. It does feel like a good starting point in a lot of ways, but it's at the same time, once again, its own standalone film. Although I imagine, given DC and WB, they want to continue the franchise and do whatever they can to get that Disney money, I guess. But yeah, absolutely enjoyed this film. This film has a lot of highlights. It's not overtly a really, really funny film. It's more of I would say the comedy is more charming and enjoyable as opposed to laugh out loud, which you could say is a little bit more accurate for James Gunn's films or other films, more particularly, Guardians of the Galaxy being, I guess, the main comparison. But everything about this film works. It just works. And I'm just enamored with just how much I enjoyed this film for being a film. It's actually quite incredible. I would recommend watching this film. I would definitely recommend watching this film if you have watched the original Suicide Squad film and hated it, because it is almost like a polar opposite. It's literally bad film, good film. But yeah, absolutely enjoyed that film. It's probably one of the stronger films, especially a mainstream AAA blockbuster to actually come out this year. So high praise. Someone actually released a good film this year. Kind of going back a little bit more, I want to talk about a series I watched over the course of a week, which was an absolute joy to watch and experience, especially given that I guess the film's coming out regarding it, and that is of course going to be the mockumentary British series People Just Do Nothing. I watched all 5 series, and I gotta say, definitely one of the stronger shows on TV in recent years. The basic premise of it is essentially follows a group of people in, I cannot remember where they are. It's somewhere just on the outskirts of London, and it's somewhere I've been, so a lot of the area and the locale looks very familiar to me, which is quite nice to see them filming somewhere like that. It essentially follows a group of characters who are essentially running a pirate radio station, and the interesting thing about the characters in this series is there's a very poetic and tragic kind of ignorance and stupidity behind the series, because the characters that do run the pirate radio station, they seem to think they're bigger than they actually are, and it is very telling so with the title of the series, People Just Do Nothing. It is a very interesting series in how the characters are portrayed. a lot of the characters, particularly the main character, I guess we'll just name him as MC Grinder. He is by far one of the more frustrating and terrible characters I've seen ever put on TV in a long time. Like, he's really not likable. But you kind of like him in the grand scope of things. He is very self-indulgent, very selfish. He's never wrong, very cocky. He is the kind of person who essentially wouldn't get very far in life to an extent, and that's part of the story in the series. You know, there are other characters as well, like his best friend, DJ Beats. You know, you obviously got characters like Chapati G, who is essentially a jack of all trades but ace of none, essentially. Kind of a bit of a con man, but a very lovable character all the while. And I do love where the story and the series goes when it kind of not only just talks about, you know, these somewhat deluded characters who are, you know, all about the music and we're so underground, but don't really see the bigger picture, that they're obviously not that big of a deal. You know, the irony in that, but kind of seeing, like, you know, these characters in their real life and how they are and how things change and evolve and how the series ultimately ends is a very interesting and fascinating series. Despite being a mockumentary, it almost does feel like a character study in of itself, and it's quite genius just how genuine and interesting the series is, as long as being, you know, very funny, because I would imagine for a lot of people watching this, they've probably met and seen people like this. But yeah, as I mentioned as well, there is a film coming out, or no, it is out actually, which I hear is done pretty well for the most part, and I'm hopefully going to be seeing it pretty soon, so I should be talking about that on the next podcast along with some other things. But let's move on to actual news stories. We've got a lot to cover, and I'm going to try and go as fast as I can and try and not be too overwhelming, because it's been a while since I've done a really big podcast like this. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that happened over the last fortnight, although technically it only happened over a couple of few days, and that is going to be the fact that the website, or kind of I don't necessarily payment-based service platform known as OnlyFans, announces a ban on sexually explicit content, then suspends/cancels said ban within a couple of days' time. Now, this was an absolute mess just to watch for 5 days in terms of everything that was discussed and covered and speculated and back and forth, and brought up so many issues and topics that it was just a nightmare to kind of follow, because it was something that I ultimately was going to discuss and talk about on this podcast if the ban was going to continue through, but as I've already mentioned, it's not. So for those of you who don't know, and I'm mainly talking about the people who essentially weren't around when this happened, essentially OnlyFans was going to ban 18 plus content from the 1st of October in order to, and quote, to comply with the requests of our banking partners and payout providers. This apparently had something to do with MasterCard and issues paying people, which was very strange. There was a lot of like back and forth, and no one really quite knew what was going on, because there were supposedly other parties who were for this or behind this, or other speculations, which I'm not necessarily going to dwell into, given that those powers don't necessarily seem to be a threat anymore. But it was a very odd situation, because naturally people were confused by this announcement, because as most people believe, 90% of OnlyFans profit is 18 plus content. It is known in the real world and jokingly known that that is where you go to get 18 plus content. So it was really weird to kind of have a platform come out and essentially state this. It's almost as if Pornhub, you know, one of the leading pornography websites, it's synonymous, well-known, world-known, essentially came out and said, we're banning all content that contains fetishes. You know, that wouldn't make any sense. You know, people would question and rightfully laugh at that. But after just a few days of, I would imagine, negative press and a lot of people discussing and a lot of people coming out in support of who are, I guess, sex workers who have essentially had their livelihoods and their job threatened by this very bizarre change, they've essentially decided that they've cancelled said ban because, and quote, they have, I've messed up the complete order of that. Essentially, they quoted and said they've secured assurance necessary to support our diverse creator community. Essentially, they were able to work out some kind of deal regarding the bank and bank payments, or however the hell exactly their process works, because I think MasterCard or other bank providers were not happy with the idea of money directly going to people who create 18 plus content, which is very bizarre, because I would imagine the bank wouldn't care what you spend your money on as long as they get their cut. But hey, it was an interesting situation. Now, people made their voices heard, they acknowledged the upset and made changes. Everyone technically wins. Although it is worth mentioning that in the sources that I'm going to provide in the description and download link, their official Twitter page says that it suspended said ban, whereas a representative of the company has said they no longer require said ban. So it's a bit confusing given the words they've used, because a lot of people are under the impression that they've just suspended it and still might do it, and yes, they still might do it, or that obviously it making the most sense, they are just straight up not going to do it, because it doesn't make any sense. Now, here's the part where things get kind of tricky with this story and with the podcast itself, because I gotta kind of come a bit clean here. I've had to rework this podcast twice. This podcast has been a bit stressful to put together because things keep changing, and they keep changing every time I come to essentially write this podcast and properly plan it and have it ready. So I'm sorry if this podcast sounds a bit frantic, but this is the reason why. I still want to mention that this could still happen, because it did happen to Tumblr. After all, Tumblr decided to ban anything it deemed, and that's the quote, that's the key word, deemed 18 plus content, which meant that a lot of people who weren't necessarily just uploading photos, it didn't work to upload their stuff. I mean, they were artists and video makers, and even myself included, I had photos uploaded on Tumblr and they claimed it was explicit content. And it was not, I can tell you that much for a fact. But here, it's important for people to understand the bigger picture. The issue here, if OnlyFans was to go through with the ban, is that it would be a massive loss of profit, which would negatively affect safer work content creators on the platform. How, you may ask? Well, essentially how I theorize things, the people who are still on OnlyFans, who still make what is appropriate content, they would essentially be in a constant state of worry, because OnlyFans could essentially at any point, just disappear off the face of the earth. It just could end, that loss of profit, their source of income gone, and even the same thing with the people themselves. They're going to lose their income. They're going to lose their job. It's a really tricky situation. I mean, OnlyFans themselves could very easily increase their tax just to survive, which would not be great, because I'd imagine they, obviously they take a cut. But still, it is interesting, because at the end of the day, lots of people would lose their job, and that would be the worst part about it. And that was what people mainly brought up the fact. You can have your opinions and your politics on whether a woman or a guy should sell their body or not. Personally, I don't care. As long as they're not stealing or hurting anyone, I don't care what you do, and I don't care what you pay for. That's my opinion. In terms of sex workers, yeah, go get that paper. I really don't care. And obviously, a lot of people brought up the fact that people are going to lose their jobs. Now, it is a very scary concept when you consider the fact that if certain powers get their own ways, and I'm talking more in a sort of grand scheme plan in terms of what people would like the internet to become, other websites would essentially be forced or would choose to put a ban on what they don't understand method. Essentially what would happen is Twitter would be gone, then Patreon, then Twitch, Instagram, YouTube. The list could go on forever, essentially. Everything you love about the internet, the freedom of speech, the opinion, or sorry, not the opinion, well, partly is opinion, the fact that you have an option as opposed to film, music, TV, creativity, originality, it'd all be gone. The internet would become nothing more than a service that you use to pay your bills and watch Disney Plus on. And there are a lot of companies that would love nothing more than for the internet to be that. It'd be horrible. And that's just the one takeaway I want to leave you guys with in regards to the whole situation regarding OnlyFans. And yeah, it is a scary prospect, but let's kind of lighten the mood a little bit more for a little bit, because we do have a few trailers to talk about, quite a few, which I'm hopefully going to get through quite quickly. And the first one is going to be for Spider-Man, I think it's No Way Home. This is the official teaser trailer. Now, I'm going to use the word teaser in quotation marks because for a 3-minute teaser trailer, it's too long and it spoils far too much. And because of that, I'm not going to talk about this trailer as I'm not going to assume... Well, I am going to talk about this trailer, excuse me. I'm not going to talk about this trailer in great detail because I think it spoils too much, and I'm not going to assume that everyone has seen Far From Home, because this film does reference the end of Far From Home. So, yeah, I'm going to talk very sparingly, but obviously if you've seen the trailer, if you know what's going on, you'll know what I mean. So, I do like the concept of what they're trying to suggest and the impact of what they're showing in this trailer. For example, I generally do like the fact that effects have been made and they're going to ripple throughout the whole film, affecting, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and everyone's life. It's interesting for a superhero film to start with a, for lack of a better word, frustrating situation that fits into like the core themes of Spider-Man, essentially balancing lifestyles and, coming of age factors like, popularity in school. It is an interesting direction for them to go into, and I do like what they're doing here. I do wonder how much of it is going to be here. I do wonder the general tone of it. Is it going to be something that we spend the first 30 minutes developing, or is it something that we're just going to see in a montage or whatever? You actually do feel consequences that did happen in that last film, which is great. It's kind of good to see because some of these Marvel films are very standalone-ish and sometimes don't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. I mean, a good example being the recently released Black Widow. But it is interesting. Well, the other thing I do like is the fact that we do have Doctor Strange in this film, which is great, as they're a character I really like, and they make for a really nice combo and polar opposites. That's a concept I really do like. Now, I'm going to be very careful with how I talk about this next part because this is the big thing everyone wants to talk about and rave about. Where it loses me is with the reference that is made in the trailer towards the end, or references. This honestly just feels like bait and pandering, which kind of discredits everything that's great about the home Spider-Man series. It's not necessary, and I don't like the fact that with Spider-Man we're doing this again, because we've already had a film that did that, and I'd imagine we're going to get another film very soon that's going to do that. So I don't know, I'm not buying it, and I don't think you should buy into it either, because there are other franchises that have done exactly the same thing and everyone hated those films and those franchises for doing it. So I don't really understand why Spider-Man gets a pass. It's a bit hypocritical, honestly. So yeah, think about what you're saying and what you're hyped for when you go into this very strategically marketed and designed film made possibly specifically just for clickbait, because a lot of films are unfortunately made for clickbait. A good example would be Space Jam 2. One of the main reasons why that film is the way it is so that it can get clickbait articles going, oh, here's the things you missed, and oh, 30 Easter eggs in the Space Jam trailer in the film. That's part of the reason, that's part of the marketing with a lot of films nowadays. But yeah, who knows, the film might be good. Those problems that I mentioned might not necessarily be that big of a factor, but hey. Moving on, we've got one more film trailer we're going to talk about, and that is going to be for Maya and the Three, which is a very odd name. This is created and directed by, I'm going to struggle to pronounce the directors' names, Joreg R. Gutsieriz. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced his name. I couldn't find anywhere that actually accurately pronounced his name, but I'll give you his surname and spelling. That's Gutierrez, who was the director of The Book of Life, a very underrated film which I would highly recommend watching, especially if you loved the Disney film Coco. They are a nice double piece, essentially, given that they focus on the same aspect, the Day of the Dead festival in Mexican culture. And sticking with themes around culture or Mexican culture, we have another animated film from him that does essentially heavily rely and is heavily inspired by that, as well as once again showcasing some fantastic character designs. Like, seriously, the level of detail and variety is so strong in terms of the colors and just the look of the characters is truly awesome. And I don't mean this in any nasty or materialistic way when I say this, but yeah, a lot of these characters would make for really nice toys and figures because, yeah, they're that well designed. It is an interesting look. I mean, I do like the weird faces and the weird proportions. It does add to the style, and it generally looks like an amazingly animated film. I do hope that it gets a lot of attention, a lot of love from those who are interested in it, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about it, just to give it a little bit more of a shout out. But yeah, the story isn't exactly original, but everything is, and maybe that's enough to elevate the film. And bizarrely enough, there was a really odd reference to 1979's The Warriors in there, which caught me off guard. But yeah, definitely wanted to recommend this film. Definitely check out the trailer, link in the description, and download link. Now, let's move on to some things I want to talk about regarding Gamescom. Now, I completely forgot about Gamescom because most conventions don't really exist anymore. And this was pretty much just a live stream event. I think at the time of recording that I'm doing this, it's still technically going on, but I've decided to kind of, draw a line there. If the biggest news story of the year appears before recording, then too bad. I can't wait around. And part of a lot of the reason why this podcast is the way it is because of Gamescom. And specifically the first trailer I'm going to talk about, or trailers, and that is going to be for Saints Row Reboot, the reveal trailer, and the Welcome to Santo's Ileso, I think that's how you pronounce it, Ileso trailer. And yeah, this touched a nerve. And not even being the biggest fan of the series, I understand why. People were not happy with that cinematic CGI reveal trailer. And yeah, we got to talk about this trailer. Although it's well animated, the reveal trailer was a massive mistake. Big time. The characters and the art style looks like it's a trailer for a new season of Fortnite. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but that's just what it looked like to me, and unfortunately to a lot of people. It's a really bad first impression when a loved franchise comes back after so long, so much speculation, so much hype, so much passion for it after so long. This franchise is, technically coming up to 20 years at this point, and it looks like Fortnite, a game that a lot of people really do not like and would cite as being one of the main factors as to why the gaming industry is an absolute mess and dying. Yeah, and no gameplay neither, just a CGI trailer that doesn't even look like the game that it's supposed to be. Not a great start. Not a great start whatsoever. And then they uploaded this kind of behind the scenes video, the Welcome to Santo's Ileso trailer, which was just bizarre because it had one of the voice actresses kind of hosting it, and then it had like weird comments from the developers, which were very troubling when you really think about it. They were making like weird comments like Saints Row needs to be rebooted, which I disagree with 100%. I think you should have done something new. And I know you technically did something new, and that was Agents of Mayhem, and that game flopped. I get it. But if anything, I don't think anyone would have been complaining if you remastered Saints Row 1 and 2. I don't think anyone would have been upset. Sure, there'll be some people disappointed there's not a new game, but here's the thing, if you do a really good job reintroducing a newer generation to a classic game, maybe tweaking it, maybe fixing some things that, let's say, gamers of today might not enjoy, yeah, you would make bank, pretty much. So yeah, not a great start. And another weird comment, which is probably one of the most problematic comments regarding this game. Actually, I take that back. There's another one. Yeah, there's one comment where the creator says something along the lines of, you're going to want to invite these characters into your living room or something along those lines. It's in the description and down. I'll link the actual video. And I think they've missed the point of their own game, because, for example, you wouldn't invite Trevor from Grand Theft Auto into your house, would you? No one would. As much as we all like Trevor as a character, he's a very dangerous and disturbed person you want nowhere near you. You don't want to be friends with Trevor. Trust me, you don't. So it is very bizarre that they are saying that these characters are going to be so relatable, so likable, that it's a bizarre comment. And it kind of gets worse because the characters themselves are really not relatable, I'm afraid. And it doesn't help the fact that I believe they've come out and stated that these characters are millennials and that they are essentially turning to a life of crime to pay off student loans. Now, this could work in another story, but not in a Saints Row game, a very established franchise. It's very problematic that you're going to have a statement like that. You're going to state that these characters are millennials, that these characters are young. You're going to essentially try and make them relatable to, I guess, other millennials. I can't relate to these characters. I'm technically a millennial, although I would never refer to myself as that. But for the purpose of proving a point, I am none of these characters. I'm none of them. I cannot relate to them. Yes, I haven't seen everything these characters have to offer, but characters like Kevin, I can't remember the guy's name, the guy who they refer to as never wearing a shirt but wants to be like a TV cook. Who is relating to that image and that preference? No one who identifies like that or looks like that is going to be playing Saints Row Reboot. I'm sorry, they're not going to. And even if they are, they will be checking how well their TikTok did while the cutscene is playing. I'm sorry, that's the matter of the fact. The other two characters, or three characters, I can't relate to. I know there's like this weird nerdy like black kid who, he has a very annoying line, or he says something along the lines of, oh, it needs to be bigger than like a gang war, it needs to be an enterprise or a company. And I'm like, that's really weird. That line single-handedly implies that they want nothing to do with Saints Row. And then you see the gameplay and it looks exactly like Saints Row. It's a real confusing situation, this game, because I cannot tell what the hell Volition Studio wants to actually do. I really don't know what their aim is. I don't know what the goal is here. It's really concerning, and I don't blame anyone for being frustrated and simply angry about this game. It's really a tricky situation to deal with at the moment, and and like I said, I don't really blame anyone for not liking this game. And even when you watch the behind the scenes video, when you watch it, the game looks empty to me. I'm sorry if that upsets you. I'm sorry if I'm offending people who've worked on this game. I know Volition is kind of in a bit of damage control. They're kind of taking down all criticism. Well, not literally taking it down, but like they're responding to it. It is very bizarre, that when I watch the trailer, it's lacking so much personality, even from the characters. Like, I've already forgotten about these characters. I'm not looking forward to these characters. I mean, unfortunately, that character that doesn't wear a shirt, he has a helmet in the trailer that looks exactly like the same kind of LED display that character in Watch Dogs 2 has. I guess they took inspiration from that. I guess they want to go for that kind of vibe. As far as I was aware, Watch Dogs 2 did not do that well, so why the hell you'd look to inspiration from that game, I do not understand. It is very, bizarre. And ironically, the developers themselves have more personality in the characters in their own game, which is quite a sad fact. I honestly think they're playing this reboot, this game, I think they're playing it way too safe. For two reasons mainly. One is this is all they have now, and it has to be a success, or I think the studio is going to be shut down. And I think they're more than happy to betray and destroy the original series in order to make that profit. And the second reason is I think they don't want this to be Cyberpunk 2077 again. I think they are terrified of this game coming out and disappointing and being talked about and regarded as another game like that, because it can happen. I get that, but very troubling situation with this game, honestly. It is a bit disappointing, and I'm not even that big of a fan of Saints Row. I've only beaten the third game, and I played the other two. So yeah, bit annoying, but let's move on to another trailer, which actually has a bit of promise, and that is going to be for the brand new game. I think it's called DokeV, which is an interesting game. I think the first thing people are going to say or reference it to is it looks like Pokemon. And yeah, it does. They are wearing their influences on their sleeve. It reminds me a lot of Pokemon. It reminds me a lot of, I guess, Grand Theft Auto to some extent. It reminds me a lot of Ni no Kuni. It reminds me a lot of Persona 5 or the Persona series. And the Monster Hunter series as well. That's the other one. It looks like it's got a lot of things going for it. And even with all those references made, it looks like an honestly original and very fun game. I don't quite know what the point of this game is, but there's a lot of aspects I like. I do like the whole idea that this is a world that you can fully traverse. You see that you have a skateboard and other means, you're flying and all that kind of stuff. The world itself looks beautiful. The animation looks fantastic. I love the fact that they are referring to the fact that they're taking inspiration from Korean folklores and like yokais and that, which is very interesting because I know nothing about that kind of stuff. So I'd be very interested to see more of that in the mainstream media. I do love the way the battles kind of play out as well. I do like how it's almost like you have your yokai demon spirit with you and they kind of help you out. Even in the trailer, you see you kind of like transform. It's got so many mechanics, and the one real big selling point, which is what I think one of the developers said, is that he took a lot of inspiration from Ghostbusters, and you do see that in the trailer. And I just love the look of this game. I love the aspect. This is a game that I'm truly excited to see more of, because honestly, if they nail this and this game comes out, and even if it comes out and it just makes a fraction of, let's say, what another more popular game does, or it gets good reviews or whatever, or they do a sequel, this is a real game changer, and this is going to put a lot of shade on Nintendo and Pokemon. Because if you look at the new open world Pokemon game and you look at this, it's almost night and day. And I've seen a lot of comments and a lot of people saying that with this game, this is what they've always wanted with Pokemon. If they nail this, this could be a real industry shakeup. So I'm going to put my fingers crossed that they do nail this, because this game, looks fantastic in my opinion. I really like the look of it. I'm really interested in it. And yeah, I just wanted to shout this game out. I mean, there's so much going on in this trailer, and it gives you so little context that I can't necessarily really go into great detail because we don't know too much about it. And that's great. It just leaves me wanting more. But I'm going to do a few quick ones real quick from Gamescom. Just a couple others that I wanted to mention that I thought were pretty good as well. The first one I want to talk about very briefly is going to be for Marvel's Midnight Sun, although it should be Marvel The Midnight Sun. I don't know. I don't necessarily know what this game is about, because I know there's a lot of misconception that this is going to be an XCOM-like game. I don't know if that's true, because all we got was a cinematic trailer, which was arguably quite cool. You see a lot of the characters, Marvel characters, that I guess do form the Midnight Suns, who are a little bit more of a spiritual-esque Avengers, I guess you could say. I believe it is based on a comic book series, and I believe this game is going to be basing itself around a particular storyline. You do see some very familiar characters, Doctor Strange, Wolverine. They do show off the newer design of Ghost Rider, which I'm not a fan of, but that's what some people have grown up with. I love the fact that we get to see... who were the other two characters I thought were pretty cool? We get to see Nico from The Runaways. She never gets any exposure outside of the actual Runaways, as well as characters like Magic, who is a very underutilized Marvel character, possibly because she's a very broken character, I guess. And yeah, really good trailer. I'm interested to see what this game's going to do. It's nice to see something different come from a Marvel game, as opposed to what the Avengers game that Crystal Dynamics made, which I think everyone's forgotten about, unfortunately. And yeah, this was a pretty cool trailer, and looking forward to this one. The next one I want to talk about, very brief to say about this one, is the Outlast Trials. Yeah, we got another Outlast game, the game which a lot of people can say or argue ruined survival horror to an extent. I don't think it has, but I do think that it's negatively affecting what people deem as a survival horror or a horror game. And yeah, they're trying something new with this Outlast series. It does seem like it's going to try and go for a little bit more of a meta approach. It seems like you're going to be put in these rooms or these trials, very sore-ish, you're going to survive, all that kind of stuff. It's a neat premise. Why it's called Outlast, I don't know. But the one thing that I did see, it made me think when I was watching this trailer, I don't know if it's just me, but does this game just look, this game looks so annoying and unfair already. It looks like it's going to be killing you in cheap ways. It looks like it's going to be frustrating. It looks like it's going to be a lot of BS in this trailer, in this game, which I'm not a fan of, like that kind of fake implemented difficulty through trial and error. And it looks like that's what they're going to do, because even in the trailer, there was a lot of situations where you just died, or you just walked into something, or something looks a little bit unrealistic that you're going to just know what to do. I mean, you could probably beat the first Outlast game without ever knowing a playthrough. Without ever looking up a playthrough? Yeah, I guess a playthrough or a walkthrough is what I meant to say. I'm tripping over my words today. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. I'm sure all the YouTubers and big personalities are going to play it when it comes out. So, Next trailer, a game that I thought looked really cool, and this is one of the last ones I am going to talk about, is going to be for Cult of the Lamb, which I believe is going to be some kind of top-down roguelike game, which seems like it's very similar in vein to games like Enter the Gungeon or The Legend of Ditto, which I'd recommend both of those games if you're into more arcadey roguelike top-down games, like I've already mentioned. And I love the way they've done the top-down perspective in a way that looks kind of 3D, but also like an open picture book. It kind of has like a almost movement to the way the background moves, and the way the literal background that your character stands behind kind of is at an angle. It's very odd. It's a very unique look. The game itself has a pretty great concept, because the little animation cutscene, it's got all these very cute little animal characters, and they, for whatever reason, being sentenced to death. I guess the character you play as, he gets the help of or is possessed by a demon who essentially liberates the people, and you kind of put together your own little like cult and rebellion against whatever powers that be, which I think is a really great concept. I love the contrast of cutesy and demonic stuff with something that kind of seems like it might be an actual serious situation or topic, because these kinds of things do happen, revolutions and whatnot, if it even is going to go down that route. I mean, this is a very involved roguelike game as well, which I do like. It's very playful. It kind of makes you like this demonic cult leader, which is, I can't think of any other game really that has you do that. And I'd imagine it is gonna like cross maybe some more grounds where it's like, who's the real evil here? Is the demon really the one doing all this? Is it the lamb? Are the people who you're being oppressed by, are they the real evil? It's a fantastic concept. I love the fact that you can destroy like false prophets. I love the fact that you can exercise, people, and essentially grow your cult to some extent. I do like that aspect. It does have a very charming and very silly aspect to it, which I honestly think works, and it's the kind of stuff that I like about a lot of independent games, and I really hope that this game picks up a lot of attention, and I believe it has, because it's just such a brilliant concept. And yeah, I'm really looking for this one. It's honestly one of the more exciting games I've seen this year, and I hope this game does release soon and does pretty well. And yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up the podcast. I know it was a long one, and I know I kind of sped through it, but I was a little worried that I was going to make this podcast too long and kind of just meander on. I wanted to kind of get straight to the point for the most part. But yeah, I guess I'm going to leave you with the video of the episode, which ironically is going to be a longer video, and that video of the episode is going to be from BADBADNOTGOOD. Yes, that is the artist's name. With Signal from the Noise, excuse me. This music video / song is nearly 10 minutes long, And if you are into or want to get into jazz fusion, jazz experimental music, I would highly recommend the band Bad Bad Not Good. This is coming from their latest new album, and if you have been paying attention, or you have, how should I put it? I guess I will say there is a connection between this music video and something else I've talked about, but I won't tell you what exactly it is. You might have to do a bit of digging if you're not necessarily sure. But yes, a really fantastic music video that's very experimental, I would say. A bit artsy. Some people might not like it because it might come across as a bit pretentious. I don't think it is. I think it's a wonderful music video, and I love the song as well, and also who stars in it. But yeah, I'm going to leave you guys with that. Yeah, this podcast was really stressful to put together. Yeah, it's kind of put a mental drain on me because things have been changing, but hopefully it turned out great. Hopefully you guys liked it. That would mean a lot to me to know that you guys liked it. But yeah, isn't really anything else to say. Hopefully I'll be doing a lot more things because I am prepared to go back to work very, very soon. So things will kind of return to normality. Might have a few more people on the podcast more often, which would be great. And yeah, I guess there isn't anything else to really say other than I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.